Welcome to Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes Ministries. Thank you for listening. Janet will be talking about her struggle with addiction, alcohol, drugs, eating disorders, unwanted same-sex attraction, and living a homosexual life. Janet has survived all those things by the grace of God. Janet's not a doctor, she's not a therapist, she's not a psychotherapist, she's not a licensed counselor. Janet is an ordained pastor and wants to show you God's promises, how God has set her free, and how you can be set free. What He has done for her, He will do it for you. If healing and freedom are what you want, you have come to the right place at the right time. Let's get started. Here is Janet Boynes.
I'm so excited to have Jamie on this show. She has a story that is so impactful. I could not wait to interview her. Jamie, welcome to Healing and Made Free.
Thank you, Janet. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, I was sitting here reading through your bio this morning, a mother of 6 children. You got 5 boys,
Yeah.
one girl.
Yep.
Your daughter, I hope she's getting a lot of love from her brothers.
Oh yeah, she loves being a big sister.
Yeah. You have quite the bio, a PTA board member and a professional nanny. What made you become a professional nanny?
Children are always my life. Even as a child, I was the neighborhood babysitter. I have 8 siblings, so it's it's just been who I am. I love children. I think children are everything. They're innocence. They're everything that is good in the world. And I think tuning into our own inner child is so important. And so I just wanted to be around children. But I also experienced quite a bit of abuse as a child. And so I think becoming a mother, becoming a nanny, it helped me heal my own inner child by caring for other children like I wanted to be cared for.
That is so true. And the reason why I didn't get married and have kids because I watched my mom go through abuse and I was raped, by one of those forefathers that was in our life. And so it made me not want to have kids because I was afraid I was going to treat my children the way my mother treated me. And I did not want to pass that type of legacy on to my children. But you went on to get your bachelor degree in public affairs and criminal justice in your 30s. But I really want to get to the core of this interview. You were at a company called Protocol Services and you resigned in 2025. You were a crisis counselor for a for-profit company. I want to talk about that. Share with my audience when you got into the job and then why you left. But let's talk about why you took the job. Why did you take this job?
Well, it's 2 parts. One is I have a lot of experience working with people in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people are suffering greatly right now mentally. And most people just need a good listening to, and I'm real good at listening.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I could help, and I wanted to continue on in social work, doing something where I felt like I could really connect directly with people and help them one-on-one. But the other part was I knew this company was based out of Portland, Oregon. I knew they were very loud and proud about their support for the LGBTQ plus community. They advertised their DEI hiring practices. I noticed right away that a large portion of my coworkers identified as they, them. So I knew what I was getting into when I started working for this company. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. But a long time ago, I asked God to lead and I promised Him I would follow. And this job just appeared. And, I got hired very quickly. I think because of my background, I've worked for other agencies, another one in Portland, Oregon, that was uh, infamous. It's a medical clinic and housing. It also does a day shelter for people that are homeless in Portland, Oregon, that are ages 18 to 25. So, so that's why I started. I felt like there was something there to learn.
You mentioned that you prayed to God. Are you saying that God gave you this job and this position?
Well, I think God has led me to a lot of different opportunities, and He leaves it up to me whether or not I want to take it up with both hands. And it was a challenge for sure. I had to kind of fly under the radar, and I felt like I was working undercover in a lot of ways. I mean, I was still doing good work with individuals, um, but yes, I do feel that I had a near death experience years ago. And at that time, it just changed everything. It
Mhm.
changed everything. Before that, I was a big supporter of this whole trans movement. Um, I have a lot of regret about things that I did. And so at that time, I was on my knees crying and praying, and it felt like a moment, a turning point in my life. So, yeah, I feel that God provided this opportunity and I went with it.
So, Jamie, you mentioned that you left the company and you no longer wanted to be a part of an unethical, allegedly unethical and potentially criminal action, which included facilitating access for minors for rejecting drugs and procedures. Let's talk about that because what year did you start this job?
In 2024.
So you
So,
started in 2024, so you're there approximately about a year. But
yeah.
soon after, you realized there was some things that just did not fit your belief system. Can we talk about those things? So what did you see that you
Um,
decided that this is not for me?
yeah, well, there was lots of things, but right off the bat, we had trainings. One of them was called Trans 101.
Mm,
There was another required training called Understanding the Gender Umbrella. Like I said, most all my coworkers identified as their pronouns. So anytime we had meetings, everybody introduced themselves with their preferred pronouns. We were instructed to always use preferred pronouns. And, that might sound like just a polite thing to do, but really the whole pronoun issue is all about proclaiming your belief in gender ideology. They also explicitly um, say in writing that they fully support gender affirming care for minors. Gender affirming care is a ridiculous term, in my opinion. It's only gender affirming if you believe in gender ideology,
mhm,
which to me is at worst, it is it's a mental illness. It's delusional thinking. It's a cognitive concern. At best, it's a cult. It's a belief. Gender ideology. I mean, it's right there in the title. Ideology. It's a belief. If I'm being polite, I can call it a religion. Thing is, in this country, we have freedom of religion, and it's they get a lot of funding from federal grants, from state grants. This is a very large company providing public service. I mean, they contract with the National Suicide Hotline, which was the majority of my calls. But going back to gender ideology and gender affirming care, I think, and also does the Health and Human Services, they refer to gender ideology as sex rejecting surgeries because that's really what it is. When you're looking at it from an objective, biological, factual, you're only looking at empirical data that can be reproduced, a scientific view, it's sex rejecting. And
mhm.
that is child abuse.
Very much so. And when you talk about gender affirming care, some of my audience might not even know the definition of what that means. What does that mean to you?
So it's a combination of things for a lot of youth. It starts with puberty blockers to stop them from going through puberty, followed up by hormone therapy. So it's drugs. Big portion of it is pharmaceutical drugs. But the other part is surgical procedures, mastectomies for young girls, um, even things like chest binding. There's all kinds of different procedures used to help them appropriate a different gender.
Mhm.
Um, and that's really what it is. They're pretending but they're being told that if they appear as another gender or sex, then that makes it so. And that is delusional thinking.
It's almost like they're encouraging them to become a trans person or a LGBT person. And I'm wondering, is that because of the financing that they get to be able
Yes.
to help those that are dealing with this issue? Do they, I'm trying to understand protocol services. Do they do surgeries there, or do they support financially those who would like to transition?
So they don't do either. So Protocol Services has contracts with over 600 different university counseling centers, mental health counseling centers, community mental health centers, and employee assistance programs. But they also, the big one is 988, the National Suicide Hotline. They are the main call center for New Mexico, for Virginia, and New Hampshire, but they are also part of the national backup system. So I answered calls from people calling 988 from all over the country. Part of our services, so it was three parts when we answered calls. We were assessing, we had to assess 6 different risk areas, but then we would stabilize callers, and that was the part that I shined at. I really enjoyed helping to de escalate people, helping people, um, listening to them and talking with them and understanding their situation and trying to offer that support. The third part is referring callers to appropriate resources. And one of those big resources is the Trevor Project.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
a lot of people call it the sacred cow of the trans community or the trans cult. Um, so the Trevor Project is where the kids were getting those resources, where to go to get these medications, these drugs, what doctors would provide these surgeries, what medical clinics. So that's where the facilitating these sex rejecting procedures comes into play with protocol.
As a person who lived as a lesbian for 14 years and a priest in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the Basilica, and I'm not afraid to name them now, and it's not even allegedly. I remember years ago when he told me and the girl I was with that, I am still a Christian. I'll still go to heaven if I decided to transition because I was more of the dominant one. And the mark that placed on me to want to commit suicide or to even think about transitioning and strapping down my breast and all those type of things had a lot to do with what I was told by not only this priest but professional counselors. And a lot of these children are getting false information that is putting them in a position of wanting to commit suicide. And then when those of us that are pastors and credentialed under the Assemblies of God, when we decide or say, no, we're not going to support your ideology, then we become the bad person and not the person who is telling them that there's more than two sexes besides male and female. And the sad thing is when those calls would come in, what was that like for you when you go back and think about it to have supported them going to possibly the Trevor program to get more assistance to help their, what I call their unbelief, as far as how God made them and the identity issues that they're dealing with, which can be traumatic. Because I believe, Jamie, that the root cause of why people want to transition is because of some type of uh, trauma that they went through as a child. Did you ever ask them some of the pertinent questions of what was your childhood like? Or did you guys just say, hey, we want to introduce you to X, Y, and Z because we believe they can help you more?
Yes, you made a lot of good points there, Janet. So there was a pretty wide range of experiences that I really do feel honored to have been able to bear witness to these testimonies. And a lot of these young people are struggling, and they were very open with me. One young man in particular, he talked about his hatred towards men, and he repeated a lot of the things that I heard from my coworkers, that white men are the oppressors, they're the problem.
Mm.
So if you are a young white boy and you don't want to be categorized into this um, label of hate, the only way out is to identify as trans. And then suddenly you're celebrated. They throw parades in your honor and you are no longer hated. Um, so I never once gave a caller information to the Trevor Project, even though it was one of the big resources utilized. I couldn't sleep at night doing something like that because I knew what happened with the Trevor Project. So I mostly listened to callers, and sometimes they would get very upset if I wasn't reflecting their beliefs. But one thing I very commonly said was, you have every right to believe whatever you want, but that doesn't necessarily make it true. Um, and mostly I would just ask questions to try to get to the root of what was going on. And yes, um, to answer one of your questions, I so often heard stories of childhood sexual abuse, um, grooming behaviors, but also just this, children are vulnerable and impressionable. And I don't know if you remember, I mean, you and I are probably close in age. When I was young, it was all about trying on different personalities, and it was the rockers and the punks and the nerds and the jocks and right? That's part of growing up. You're trying to figure out who you are. You're separating from your parents and you're becoming your own person. And there's a natural process going on there. But when there's this huge religion or cult that is telling you this is how you become most liked, this is how you become popular, this is how you get all the attention and praise. I also think there is a spiritual aspect about this being sold to people. I oftentimes, when I asked questions like, what is it that it attracts you to this um, identity? I would hear them say, well, when you identify as non binary, which was very common amongst the young girls, you have transcended the confines of gender constructs. So you've broken away from a box that society is trying to put you in. This was the things that I heard. And just that word transcendence, I think, is a really important thing to consider.
Why so? Why so?
Well, because it's language that's used in all kinds of spiritual traditions and religions. Transcendence is equivalent to enlightenment. It's you're being lifted to a level of wisdom and understanding beyond the human experience, right? It's reaching for the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I really do categorize this whole trans movement as a religion or a cult, um, which I think could change everything significantly because it's already in our Constitution, separation of church and state. So, and just like so many Christians would love to have prayer in schools, they would love to have um, Christianity taught to children at a young age in public institutions. But the reason why it's not so is because of that separation. We can't have any one religion taking over our public institutions. That's just, especially a religion that has measurable harms. I mean, sterilizing children. How on earth has that been justified? Children are categorically incapable of making those decisions. And any parent, teacher, or doctor who convinces a child to do this should be criminally liable. It's a great tragedy. It really is.
Those of you that are listening, you're listening to Jamie, who worked for a company called Protocol Services, who now believes that they should be held criminally liable for indoctrinating vulnerable children into a religion or a belief system that causes mental illness. Some of you know people that have went into the lifestyle. You might be in that lifestyle yourself, or you might know a pastor or ministry leader that should listen to this and possibly have Jamie come and speak at your church or to your staff or to your young adults. Please, please, if you're watching this or listening to this, pass this on because this information is so important. Your child could be calling protocol services, and we need to stand up against these services, even the Trevor program that is trying to harm our children more than they have already been harmed. You know, Jamie, when you talk about criminally liable because they're indoctrinating vulnerable children. These kids are vulnerable. They're just looking for somebody to attach to so they can support their ideology because a lot of family members might not have. How many children do you get or about that call in and say, you know, I don't get support from my family and I want to commit suicide. I'm just looking for a place to belong.
Um, actually, there was a lot less than you would think.
Really?
I think that's a situation that's advertised as, oh, these kids are going to commit suicide if we don't give them the drugs and surgeries they're asking for.
Hmm.
Um, I do think that that's a manipulation tactic in a lot of ways, and it's being
I've
given
said
to
that
them.
many times. Thank
Yes,
you. Go ahead.
and that's not to take away from the seriousness of people who are suffering and having suicidal thoughts. But the kids who did call that talked about that. We had a risk assessment where we asked about their actual intention to follow through on this and method and means. And a lot of the kids, you could tell it was just sort of something that they knew they could say in order to get what they wanted. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's a
So
reality.
manipulating. It's
It
true,
really is.
though. It's
Yeah.
true. And that's the fear that parents have because I work more with parents and pastors around the country. And, you know, there's a small percentage that call into Janet Boynes Ministries that is wanting help. There's a lot that call in. There's a lot of men that call in. There's a lot of women that call in, but they just want to talk to somebody who's on the other side. They
Mhm.
just want hope that one day they'll get there. They're not ready, but one day they'll get there because you know, they said they've heard me speak and I'm so kind to people, and I really am. I do my best to be kind to them because when it's time for them to walk out of life, I want them to find our ministry to
Mhm.
so we can do what we can to assist them in walking out that journey and turning their lives over to Christ. But the sad thing is that we need more from our churches. We need more from parents to not be manipulated by their child, and that's their biggest fear. Well, my child threatened if we didn't support their ideology, they're going to commit suicide. Or, you know, I'm afraid my child's going to commit suicide. And I said, wait a minute. We don't ever want to see your child commit suicide. So you're going to take on that responsibility just because you won't support them transitioning. I said, would
Mhm.
you allow drugs in your home? You know, if so, tell me yes, because, you know, otherwise you might as well just, you know, bring all the drug addicts in your home, you know, and just allow your child to commit suicide right
Yeah.
there, you
Yeah.
know, because that's what you're doing. You're literally taking a needle and putting it into their arms because
Mhm.
they're going to get out there and get depressed. How many children would come to you that you talk with that was so depressed that you actually thought they would commit suicide?
There were some of those children, yes. And then I got to mention self harm. So cutting themselves, that type of thing. The way protocol handled that, I think they actually encouraged it. And I know that's a pretty big accusation, but I can't tell you how many counselors, and I quote, they called it a healthy coping tool to
Hmm.
deal with life's ups and downs. And so we assessed for severity of the wounds. We talked about, proper wound care. There were a couple kids where I did have to get 911 involved, emergency services, because the bleeding didn't stop after a prolonged period of time, or the cuts were deep enough. Um, However, I got to say it's become I think part of that manipulation strategy to prove their suicidality is to cut themselves. And that being encouraged, not just through things like the Trevor Project and protocol, but also you see it in Roblox has gotten a lot of coverage lately on different podcasts talking about the self-harm being something very much celebrated. It's like the initiation to be in the club.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a problem. But the thing with protocol too is they're a for-profit company. My supervisor once called the kids who text in, she called them the company's bread and butter. And
Oh,
that
wow.
really was quite disturbing to me. And so many of the calls involved the self-harm.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can't help but feel that that was something significant.
I can see just looking at your face just how you really feel about the things that you've heard and what you saw, and even a company that is pretty much forcing you to give a pronoun instead of your real name. When you decided to go to your supervisor to share with them your thoughts and how you felt, how did they respond?
They said, I'm heartbroken that you don't feel aligned with protocol. So, sorry you feel that way, which I think most people with even just an ounce of common sense knows that that's not any kind of acknowledgement or apology. When you say to somebody you're sorry, they feel that way. So there was really no discussion. It just wasn't up for discussion. The times that I pushed back on particular situations that I would bring up with my supervisor, especially times when they decided to report or not report child abuse. So sometimes callers would disclose things. As a mandatory reporter, I was required to report to Child Protective Services.
Absolutely.
But their policy was that you had to consult with a supervisor. And then if you disagreed, then they had to pull another supervisor in. But what I found time and time again was that the two supervisors would agree, and then I would disagree, and I was outnumbered, so a report was not made. The times when reports were not made, I noticed a pattern that the accused, the alleged perpetrator, identified as trans. That to me was incredibly disturbing. Whereas in situations where there was abuse being reported and the accused perpetrator was a parent, not affirming their child's gender identity,
Mhm.
suddenly that was emotional abuse that was reportable. That to me made absolutely no sense.
Right.
Uh, there were actually, just to confess, there were several times where my supervisor said, nope, this is not reportable. And I just couldn't sleep at night. And I woke up the next day and I called CPS and I made the report against the company's wishes.
Mhm.
Um, and when I reported those incidences, I explained that situation because, of course, they ask you, how did you come about this information? So I had to disclose that it was through my work and that I was a mandatory reporter, and I take that very serious. Ultimately, no matter what company I work for, I feel my job is reporting abuse. And
Yes.
so I did. And they followed up on it. And in one case in particular that I followed up on, they did confirm indeed the child was being raped by his father, who identified as trans. And this was a 4-year-old child.
Oh
So
my gosh.
that was not going to be reported. And the reason why they said is that it was only speculative, that the information we got from the caller was speculative. But if you think about it, every reported situation is speculative, right?
Yeah.
But when you're being told that there's physical abuse happening, and especially when the caller is a family member, as it was in this particular situation, they had firsthand uh, understanding and observed the abuse. You have
Why
to
didn't
take
they
that.
call why didn't they call 911? Why are they calling protocol services?
This in this particular case, that family member was afraid of retaliation. He said that he would be as good as dead if his family found out that he reported. So he was hoping if he called 988, that he could do it anonymously and that we could do the reporting for him.
Jamie, and coming to a close, what was it that you decided this is not going to work for me? I am no longer going to work here. I'm going to resign. What transpired?
Actually, the thing that blew my cover was the AI program they brought in. So a week before I
Oh
resigned,
boy.
yeah, technology. They brought in an AI program to monitor callers or call takers.
Really?
And suddenly, I was praised for the first year for my rapport building. Again and again, I was told that my rapport building skills were excellent. Suddenly, I was being called out for, they said I was going out of role. Um, and then, the real topper was they said I failed to report potential child abuse, which is the thing that I was accusing them of. And in that particular case, it was an adult in their 50s calling in to talk about abuse that they had experienced as a child. And the abuser was deceased. They had already reported it as a child, and nobody listened. Nobody did anything about it. So clearly, there was no alleged perpetrator even alive to be a threat in this situation. And I did consult on this particular call, but they still said that um, I didn't consult well enough. It was a very strange situation. It felt like gaslighting towards the end there, by an AI supervisor. So I decided,
Oops.
okay, time to go. But also, I just knew it was time. I knew I had enough evidence to reveal what was going on. Um, and my time was over. So now I'm working as a victim advocate. I'm back in the field of law, working for my county attorney's office, and I'm doing good work still. So,
That is amazing. And you are writing a book.
yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
So it doesn't have a title yet, and I'm only about halfway through. I've got some more work to do, but it's basically just it's an unusual combination of my experiences in social work. I've also worked in foster care for the state of Washington and witnessed them transitioning an 8-year-old girl from a girl to a boy. I spoke out against that, and I was demoted and then fired. And I was very professional and respectfully just questioning, is this right? This girl is 8 years old and she's experienced severe sexual abuse. Are we being trauma informed? Are we taking that
Mhm.
into consideration?
Mhm.
Her father had told her, if you were a boy, this wouldn't have happened to you. And now she's transitioning into what she believes is a boy. Um, I've had a lot of different experiences with this. And like I said in the beginning, I do feel that God has laid these breadcrumbs at my feet and has asked me to figure this out so that I could share it with people, so that I could inspire teachers, parents, doctors who are seeing what's going on to speak up. Um, it's not easy. And like I said, I've been fired. I actually had a mob at a dinner party, and these were with professionals. There were all kinds of people in life that would normally give you their seat on the bus.
Mhm.
But I disagreed with them on this, and one man became violent, and other people followed. And I mean, I had never been accosted like that before, just for disagreeing on something. So yeah, my book is a combination just of all these stories, but I'm combining this with my experiences with God, and how I do believe this is it's a real spiritual warfare that we're in. It is good and evil. When you
Mhm.
have children, when you state sanctioned abuse against children. And then not to even mention the women in prisons being raped because of gender ideology. Once we make it absolute that men can be women and women can be men, now you have things like men in women's sports and men in women's prisons. And this is just, it's insanity unleashing. So, yeah, that's what my book is going to be about.
That is exciting. We need more men and women that should be, and I wish they were, whistleblowers on companies. And as we expose these companies, it doesn't really seem like anything is being done. They all want to shut down ministries like mine, but they don't want to shut down these type of people who are putting our children in unethical places where they will commit suicide one day. But when it's all said and done, they wind up coming to Christians anyway and asking for help. And we're the ones who really decide to help them. I know a girl that transitioned. I know a guy that transitioned. They went back to the doctors that transitioned them, and now they don't even want to help them. You're on your own. They're willing to transition them, get the money, but they're not willing to help them when they really feel like they're in trouble or their body is shutting down. And that is sad to see and watch. And I'm so honored, Jamie, that you would come on Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes and share your story. And I want to do everything I can to help you reach as many people as we can, and hopefully come to a place where this company can be sued and other companies that have fired you for not supporting their ideology.
Yes, I can't agree with you more, Janet. And, gender clinics all over the country are shutting down. Laws are changing. I think that people are realizing what's going on here, and their courage is gaining and the wisdom is rising. I think people do have common sense. I think just people are hesitant to speak out because they don't want to be ostracized. They don't want to be rude. I think a lot of times people just want to be polite, and they think that it is compassionate to go along. But when you go along with something that is causing real measurable harms, that makes you guilty, So, yeah, I think we all, for the sake of the children, we all need to speak up.
Thank you for what you're doing. And we are in a spiritual battle, and we need the supernatural to give birth to the natural. We need God today more than ever before. Thank you so much for being on Healing and Made Free, Jamie.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you for listening to Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes. Acts 10:34 says, God is no respecter of persons. God doesn't play favorites, which means what he has done for Janet, what he has done for guests on this show, he will do for you too. If you are struggling with anything, do not hesitate to reach out to Janet Boynes Ministries. They will do their best to help you any way they can. Go to the website, janetboynesministries.com. Janet loves you, and most importantly, God loves you. Have a blessed day.